Before we start the video, I should mention that this is an entirely theoretical story that I only made based on my own theories. These are theories, and I don't necessarily think that they have to be true. I believe them, but I don't think they're factual or anything. I just decided to make this short story based around some theories I believe. If you disagree with some of the theories related to the story, that's completely fine. I think it'll be best if you go into this video trying to enjoy the story itself, rather than the implications. Also, it's completely fan-made, it is not a prediction, but an idea. Enjoy the story. The old TV buzzed. Birds outside chirped. The couch was soft and comfortable, but it didn't make the feeling of molten liquid pumping through Michael's blood go away. But he was used to it. He'd felt this way for over 35 years. The Freddy and Friends cartoon on the old TV played iconic old songs, music to Mike's ears. He hated these cartoons, but it's all he allowed it to play. Mike shuddered. Just thinking about him disgusted him. An electrical buzzing sounded, quickly transferring all throughout the house. The lights shut off. The fridge started humming. The frozen fettuccine alfredo in the microwave suddenly stopped heating up, the sizzling sound of the pasta now all Mike could hear. Everything in the house had shut off except one thing. The old TV started buzzing louder. Michael's popcorn crunched in his mouth. Episode 1 of Freddy and Friends on Tour began to play, minor glitches appearing here and there. It felt like hours, but the reality was only a few minutes had passed by the time episode 3 made it on. The screen began glitching profusely, the same story of each episode barely shining through. The sight of Bonnie offering Foxy to join the band was barely visible behind a purple static, reminding Mike of the incidents all those years ago. At 66 years old, Mike was getting old and weak. He couldn't die if he tried, but the bubbling liquid inside him didn't repair his aching bones, his tiny muscles, or his raspy turned voice. Mike began to stand up to check the circuit, but suddenly episode 4 came on, a much darker sound coming from the TV. Mike sat back down, knowing what was going to happen. He'd seen all this before. The episode was getting more and more glitchy. Purple and yellow blots continuously flashed on the screen. As more appeared, the figure they depicted started becoming more and more clear to him. The episode ended, and a yellow rabbit figure appeared on the screen, slowly fading in. There were even more glitches on the screen now. Mike didn't know what to do. The figure had appeared on his TV before, but not in this house, and not on this TV. He'd been stuck watching these tapes for over 30 years, but he had only ever had this rabbit appear once. 5 years ago. He finally recognized that it wasn't his old TV or his old house that encased this digital monster. It was the tapes. The rabbit dissipated once more, and suddenly, the molten liquid in his body did as well. The feeling was gone. Instant relief. But he didn't understand how this was possible. Where did it all go? Mike heard a voice. It was the sound of a young boy speaking. It was a voice he could never forget. Even after 52 whole years, he never forgot it, and he never would. Thank you. Mike was free. He was no longer held back. He was no longer stuck in a miserable body. He no longer had to feel the pain of losing the one he loved, a feeling he knew all too well. His sister, his brother, his wife. He couldn't die. All he could do before now was sit and watch all his loved ones around him fall ill and die, or die by his hand, or the hand of the man he hated more than anything. But now, he couldn't stand to lose his daughter. He lost her once, but he wouldn't lose her again. She truly was the spitting image of his little sister. He couldn't lose her. She was the most precious thing in the world to him. Not only was she precious as his daughter, but it made Michael feel like his sister was still with him. It was a feeling that was strange to him. It was an oddly familiar feeling. It really felt like his daughter was truly his sister. The monster kept her, imprisoned her The rabbit stole Mike's daughter away from him and turned his granddaughter into his own daughter.
Monster.
Mike would not lose her again, and when she finally could pass, he would already be gone. He no longer had anything keeping him alive. All that was left was will to live, of which he had none left. He lost his will to live 12 years ago. For the first time in 12 years, Mike was happy, even when he heard a familiar, feminine-sounding voice coming from the dark hallway ahead of him. He was happy. He was happy because he knew he had nothing left to do. He knew his daughter and his brother together could handle it. They didn't need him anymore. And Mike himself? Mike didn't have anything left to live for, but them. And he knew they'd be better off without him anyway. Something emerged from the shadows. It was a red and white robotic feminine figure. She was beautiful, he knew. He understood his sister had gone too far, but he would never stop loving her. He wouldn't judge her for wanting her father to love her. If only she understood that Mike loved her. If only that was enough. Mike looked down at his watch one last time. It was 8:23 p.m. No one else would have understood why that number was important. 83 minutes passed, the 19th hour of the day. Mike looked at the TV one last time. The rabbit now finally completely gone. He recognized that his work was done. He was satisfied. Vanessa had always wanted a child. She never had anyone to have one with. She was still very young, only 23 years old, but she had never had a boyfriend. She always dreamed that one day she would meet the perfect guy, lock eyes, and fall madly in love. She hoped to have met this guy by 20, but 3 years had gone by with no sign of her soulmate. She hoped one day she and the man would get married and have children, preferably two, a boy and a girl. One man she'd met recently had seemed to be that soulmate, but she felt that by now, she'd already ruined the chance. She never thought she would get a child under these circumstances. She never expected to have to lie to a child she adopted after unwillingly trying to kill him. Gregory had never known what it was like to have a family. He may have looked like the man she never had the chance to meet, but they were not the same person. The young boy had been through so much in so little time. She didn't know if she was capable of taking care of him. Maybe her dad could help. If anyone could, he could. Stepping up onto his porch after everything that had happened felt strange. She knew it wasn't just the fact of it being a different house from the one she grew up in. She had spent a few years here and had gotten used to it. Her father had bought this new house about 10 years ago due to the construction of the Pizzaplex. She knew her anxiety wasn't regarding that. Walking up to the door with Gregory's hand in hers overwhelmed her. She had a bad feeling. It was as if something was wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on what it was. She looked down at Gregory, who looked back at her, smiling. He was happy to finally have someone who cared about him. Vanessa, on the other hand, was growing very weary. She couldn't muster the strength to knock on the door. She lifted her fist to knock, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. She dropped her fist and took one step back. Gregory looked confused. He lifted his own fist and knocked on the door. 30 seconds felt like hours as Gregory and Vanessa stood on her father's empty front porch, alone. Vanessa started to worry. The car was in the driveway, so her father hadn't gone out, even if he could have. Vanessa pounded on the door one more time, but when no one answered, she pulled out the spare key she had to the house. She inserted the key into the lock and opened the door. Instantly, she noticed the dead silence in the house. To fill the silence, she yelled for her father. "Dad?" "Where is he?" Gregory asked Vanessa. "I don't know, bud." A sudden clash came from the kitchen, and Vanessa prompted Gregory to stand behind her. Slowly, Gregory and Vanessa inched towards the kitchen, finding nothing. Next to the kitchen, there was a Barcalounger facing a TV that had a silent, empty void on the screen. When she was younger, Vanessa would always have to watch TV on her phone. Money was a bit tight, so they couldn't afford more than one TV. Her dad was always watching old cartoon tapes of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He always kept an eye on them, almost as if he expected something new every time he played these same tapes. He had to have watched them thousands of times in the years before, and since she had been... He had to have watched them thousands of times in the years before and since she had been born. The weirdest part was how much he hated them, but he always still watched them. Vanessa didn't even remember him ever changing the channel. She always just assumed that it was nostalgia, as he used to work at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. That's how he brought in money. But once Freddy's disappeared, he sat on the couch every day, watching these cartoons. But he didn't do anything else. He just sat there all day. He only ever got up to pee, or to eat, or to sleep. But sometimes he would even sleep on the couch, the cartoon tapes still playing in the background. Is that him? Vanessa snapped back to reality, noticing a figure sitting on the chair. Dad? Stepping closer, Vanessa noticed drops of liquid on the floor. By the time she was within arm's reach of her dad, she realized that the drops were red. Her heart sank. She instantly knew. Dad? Is he okay? Vanessa ran to face her father. She found that his eyes had still been open, but the soul of the man who raised her had dissipated. All that sat in front of her was a shell, a husk of a man that once was, but is no more. Gregory stood beside Vanessa, realizing what was going on. He threw his arms around her, but Vanessa just stood there, her jaw dropped to the floor, eyes widened, eyebrows raised, and short sounds of shock releasing from her mouth every few seconds. Gregory stood in Michael's kitchen, appalled at what he and Vanessa had just walked in on. He heard the thunder rumbling outside in the stormy night. Nearly 5 minutes had passed since they'd discovered Michael, but Vanessa hadn't moved. Gregory thought he may have seen a tear or two roll down her face. Michael's bedroom was down the hall and to the left. Walking through the hallway, Gregory noticed a trail of bloody footprints on the floor. These footprints led straight down the hall, right next to Michael's bedroom. Gregory peered into Michael's room. The footsteps didn't split or extend into the room, but the lamp on the floor caught Gregory's eye. Gregory felt strange to be walking into the room of a dead man, but he knew it could lead to a clue as to what really happened to him. A small table sat next to Michael's bed, which had been where Gregory assumed the lamp would have normally been if it hadn't been on the floor. However, Gregory noted that there had been something sticking out of the wall. Moving closer, he realized it had been a TV remote. The area of the wall surrounding it had been greatly dented. Given that the bloody footprints didn't extend into this room, Gregory assumed that whatever was in here had thrown the TV remote at the wall, knocking over the lamp and getting the remote stuck in the wall. What worried him was the amount of force that would have been needed to launch the small TV remote at a wall with such strength and speed that it would be infused into the wall rather than bounce off it. Whatever was in here had been strong and dangerous. The voice of a little girl sounded from the other room. The words spoken were indistinguishable, but Gregory could tell it was a child, and it sounded very feminine. Stepping back out into the hallway, Gregory realized the sound came from the bedroom the bloody footprints led into. Opening the door made a loud creaking sound. Gregory felt like his heart was pounding. The bloody footprints continued into the room, but they turned to the left. The cause of these footprints was made instantly clear. The footprints went straight into the wall, and ingrained into the wall stood a shadow. This shadow had glowing white eyes, and seemed to have some hair in twin pigtails. Gregory could make out vague colors on the shadow, outlining its mouth and its fingers. The shadow was staring directly at Gregory. One of the hands of this shadow lifted up, moving its index finger to its mouth. Shh. In an instant, the shadow disappeared, leaving Gregory alone in a dark, empty bedroom.